Hey everybody, welcome back to another video. So today we're talking about the Fujifilm X-E4, and this camera is actually very similar to the X-S10 in terms of photo and video specs, and as well as it's not weather sealed. The only big difference here is that it lacks IBIS or in-body image stabilization. Now I feel like Fujifilm did that because this is primarily a photo first camera, even though image stabilization does help out in like low light photography, but I also think they did that to keep the design and form factor as minimal and compact as possible, which is the only other difference compared to the X-S10 is the design. So it's very similar to the X100 series, so it has that rangefinder camera look, and it just looks so good. It just looks like a very sexy camera, which is a very weird thing to say about a camera, but it is true. So this has the exact same 26.1 x-trans 4 CMOS APS-C sensor as found on the X-T4, the X-T3, the X100V, and the X-S10, all of which are a little more expensive than the X-E4, but you get the exact same image quality. Now, isn't that great? Now, the first thing we're going to be talking about is the ergonomics of this camera. Now, the design is very minimal, which a lot of people did not like because it lacked a focus switch and just customizable buttons in general, which were both found on the previous iteration, the X-E3, as well as the current X100V. Now the layout is super minimal. You just have the shutter speed dial on top. Next to that is the exposure compensation dial. You have a quick menu button that you can actually customize in the settings, a single customizable button next to the shutter. On the front, you have a dial that you can actually press to switch to different functions altogether. And on the back, you have your drive delete button, your playback button, and your focus AEL and AFL button. And that's pretty much that. Very minimal. Now on the camera, you can see that there is no grip whatsoever. So it's literally like this brick with lens on it. But does that mean that it's a bad camera to shoot with? Honestly, for me, it was just weird at first that it didn't have a grip because I'm so used to the X-S10, and the X-S10 has a fantastic grip, so it's super comfortable to shoot with after long periods of time. But after shooting with this for a bit, since my hands aren't that big, the shooting experience was still pretty good. Now Fujifilm does sell a couple of accessories that you have to buy separately, namely a grip and a thumb rest, both of which are pretty expensive because they go for like $70 and $80 each, so that was out of the question for me. But I do have a list of accessories that really helped out with the shooting experience on the X-E4, so stay tuned for that. As I said earlier, this has the exact same flagship sensor as you can find on the X-T4 and many more. So rest assured, the photos and videos you'll be getting from this camera are going to be absolutely amazing. Also, you'll get all 18 film simulations that you can find on the X-T4 and the X-S10, so you have a lot to choose from. My personal favorites being Provia, Classic Chrome, and Classic Neg for photos. And I think that's what really sets Fujifilm apart from other camera brands. It's just the selection of film simulations, because there are so many, they're all so good, and you can tweak them to your liking in the settings. So that's great. So if you're the kind of person who doesn't like to do a lot of editing in post, film simulations are the way to go. So you can choose the image size and aspect ratio you want to shoot in. So whether you want to shoot in the 16:9 aspect ratio, the 4:3, or the 1:1, so you no longer have to crop for Instagram, you can switch between them really easily. You can also shoot RAW, JPEG, or both. You can also do a lot of cool things in camera, like adding grain to your photos, enhancing your blues, adjusting the tone curves of the film simulations given, as well as adjusting the color and sharpness of the overall image. So just a lot of things you can do in camera to get the best possible output immediately. You can shoot up to 8 frames per second with the mechanical shutter, and you can shoot up to 30 frames per second with the electronic shutter. Now another thing that sets this apart from the X-S10 is the tilt up screen. So it does that, which is much better for shooting photos because you can shoot from the hip a lot easier as compared to shooting with a fully articulating screen where you'd have to bring that all the way out. So yeah, this is better for photos, but for video, you can tilt it all the way up so you can see yourself or you can monitor whatever you're shooting. So that's great. Now, I've been having a great time bringing this everywhere with me and just taking photos because it's so small. I mean, look at it. It's so small and compact, and nobody seems to care that I take pictures of everything because it's just so inconspicuous. So yeah, here are a few sample photos I shot with the Fujifilm X-E4. If you're wondering if this can shoot product photography, it definitely can. A couple of months ago, I shot with a friend using the X-S10. It should have identical images because it's the same sensor. So if you want more sample images, go over to my X-S10 review. The X-E4 is actually a very capable video camera despite being a photo first camera. You can shoot full HD 23.98 frames per second up to 60p from 50 Mbps all the way to 200 Mbps, which is amazing because 200 Mbps just looks so good, so detailed, so crispy. But the file sizes are absolutely huge, as in they're huge. Like, I probably need to buy another hard drive if I keep shooting in 200 Mbps. So that's why I shoot with 100 Mbps, and it still gives off a great image while saving me a couple of terabytes of storage. For 4K, you'll be able to shoot 30 frames per second up to 200 Mbps. In terms of high frame rates, you can shoot 120 and 240 with this camera, which is insane considering how small this body is. I mean, like, look at it. The biggest downside is that you can't choose the bitrate of your video, but 120p still looks very sharp, still looks very good and detailed. The 240 won't look as sharp, but it still looks pretty decent. Now, honestly, I would have been very happy with just 120p, but the fact that you can shoot 240 absolutely blows me away. So thank you, Fuji. Thank you so much. It can also shoot full HD and 4K DCI, which means you'll be able to shoot with the 17:9 aspect ratio as apart from the regular 16:9 aspect ratio. So this is a great feature to have in camera because this is usually something that you'd have to do in post. All 18 film simulations are also available to shoot with in video, and you can also adjust them to your liking, like in photo, as well as the sharpness and color of your overall image. You can also shoot in F-Log, which is a much more flat profile. So if you wanted a little more control and data in post when color grading, you can shoot F-Log. But it is 8-bit video, so it isn't really advisable to do that. But if you really need to shoot 10-bit video, you can always connect an external recorder via the micro HDMI port on this side. So that's still pretty handy. For audio, you get a 3.5mm mic input as well as a dongle so you can connect your headphones via the USB-C port. Now, in terms of video autofocus, it works really, really well because the X-E4 has Fujifilm's latest autofocusing system. So this really sets it apart compared to other models like the X-T30. Despite them having the same sensor, this will have better autofocus for both photo and video. And I usually shoot everything in continuous autofocus with face and eye detection, and it really works. I mean, it keeps my face in focus all of the time. It might breathe every now and then, but it's not bad, and it works well with all of the lenses that I have, namely the 18-55, the 23f2, and the 27mm pancake lens. Let's go ahead and talk about the biggest difference between the X-E4 and the X-S10, and that's in-body image stabilization. So whenever I shot in 23.98 frames per second with this pancake lens, it was very shaky, pretty much unusable. And that makes sense because this lens isn't optically stabilized and it's a pretty tight focal length at 40 in full frame. So that makes sense. So there's a lot of things that you can do to help stabilize your footage. You could get a strap so there's more resistance. You could lock it off on a tripod, or you could shoot in a higher frame rate like 60p to slow it down in post so it's a little smoother. But if you do have to shoot in real time 24p, I suggest getting an optically stabilized lens like the 18-55 kit or the 15-45 kit. Plus, they're a lot more versatile. Overall, shooting with an optically stabilized lens really helped get rid of the micro jitter. So just keep that in mind when shooting 24p. Let's go ahead and talk about low light performance. Now, this does not have IBIS, and that plays a big role in low light photography, but I still had a really good time shooting. I mean, the output wasn't bad at all. Most of the photos were shot with this 27mm pancake lens, so it wasn't stabilized either. I was able to go up to like ISO 4000 and still got a great image. The X-Trans4 sensor is just great in low light as well. For video, I shot with the 18-55 kit, so that has image stabilization, and it worked out pretty well. I was able to get up to ISO 3200 and still got very good videos. So yeah, overall, low light performance without IBIS still performed very well. Now, as somebody who is very used to the DSLR type PSAM dial design, there was definitely a learning curve to using this camera. My first struggle was, how am I gonna switch from photo to video? Where's the dial? But it turns out you have to go into the drive setting, and that's where you switch. It honestly sounds like a hassle at first, but once you get used to it, it's just gonna be like... My biggest problem was when you switch from photo to video, you end up bringing those photo settings with you. So obviously that's not ideal, especially when it comes to like shutter speed and stuff. There is a fix though. So all you need to do in movie mode is turn on movie optimized control. So basically that disables your shutter speed dial as well as your aperture ring in video mode. And when you go back to photo, you can use the shutter speed dial and the aperture ring again. You can adjust the exposure triangle in video with the front dial. You'll be able to switch between the shutter speed, the aperture, and the ISO with that. So that's just a solution for people who like to shoot photo and video simultaneously. Now, in terms of actually using this camera outside, so far it's been a pleasant experience. Of course, the learning curve of not being used to this layout was challenging at first, exposing and all of that. But once I got used to it, it was a very good shooting experience. It's just great to not have to bring a proper camera bag when I want to go out and casually shoot videos. I just throw it in my Moment fanny sling, video coming soon, by the way, and just bring it everywhere with me. And it's just great because that's what I wanted. I wanted a small compact camera that I could practice shooting outside with, and the X-E4 is perfect for that. Now, you can currently only get the X-E4 with a 27mm f2.8 pancake lens for $1,049 here in the US and $59,990 in the Philippines. You can get it for a little cheaper if you get it body only, but the question is, should you splurge a little more to get this pancake lens, or should you go body only and just get a kit lens? Well, the answer depends on you and what you want to do, but my personal opinion is I think the X-E4 and the pancake lens just go so well together. They're pretty much perfect for the everyday shooter because it's so small, it's so compact, and the focal length is great at 40 mils, so it's great for street photography and portraits. You get an f2.8 aperture, so you can still get very good background separation. It's weather sealed. It's just a great lens, and look at it, it's freaking tiny. Now, you shouldn't get this if this is going to be your main like YouTube camera. So I suggest getting a kit lens like the 18-55 or the 15-45 instead, because it's just more versatile. But if you can get both, then that's great. But I think this is the perfect everyday compact kit. I do think that the pancake is worth it because you get it for $200 cheaper as well. So what can I say about the X-E4? Well, I freaking love it, and I think it's going to be a great everyday camera. If this is your first camera, that's great. If it's your primary camera, that's great. If it's your B camera, that's also great. It's just a fantastic little camera that looks absolutely beautiful. So yeah, that's pretty much that for this video. If you guys have any questions, feel free to ask them in the comments below. I will try to answer as best as I can. So yeah, like this video if you enjoyed it, subscribe if you haven't already, and I will see you in the next video.